Good evening, and welcome to Still Night Stories. Wherever you are tonight, may the quiet of this story bring you peace. Take a deep breath. Let the day settle behind you. The noise, the errands, the expectations, they can all wait. Tonight, we're going somewhere calm. Somewhere where time itself moves a little slower. The first snow of the season has just arrived in a small mountain town in Vermont. It came softly. Like a secret, the sky whispered only to those who were listening. No thunder, no fanfare, just the gentle hush of flakes landing on pine needles and rooftops. The kind of snow that makes even the roads sound polite. Down a narrow lane where birch trees bend under the weight of white, there stands a cabin built from old cedar and patience. Its timbers have seen 40 winters and stood through each of them the same way, quietly, faithfully. Inside lives a man named Henry Miles, 72 years old, a retired school teacher. The kind of man who once knew every child's name in town and could still tell you which one learned their letters by tracing them in the air. Now his world has become smaller, but no less full. A kettle hums on the stove. An old radio murmurs somewhere behind him, the signal fading in and out through the snow. And at his feet lies Cooper, his aging dog, asleep and dreaming of something warm. Henry moves slowly, not because time has slowed him, but because he's learned there's no reason to rush through peace. He pours the hot water over the tea leaves and watches the steam rise like breath meeting the air. The scent of chamomile and honey fills the small kitchen, mixing with the faint smell of cedar from the logs stacked near the hearth. He's been alone here for 7 winters now, ever since Elaine, his wife, passed on an evening not so different from this one. For a long time, he thought winter would never feel gentle again. But somehow, as the years passed, the season began to soften around him. Like a friend who returns with fewer words but deeper warmth, he carries his cup to the window and stands there, watching the snow fall through the soft light of the lantern he keeps burning by the sill. Outside, the world is erased and rewritten in white. Fence posts vanish. The river behind the cabin grows quiet beneath its thin sheet of ice. The mountains themselves seem to breathe slower, wrapped in their blankets of cloud. Henry smiles to himself and murmurs. Every winter feels quieter, but somehow kinder too. He takes a sip, the heat of the tea steady in his hands. Somewhere deep inside, he feels a memory stirring, the first time he and Elaine saw this cabin. Decades ago, it had been summer then. Wildflowers everywhere, the air heavy with the scent of pine resin and sun-baked wood. Elaine had turned to him and said, "This is where I want to grow old, where even the silence sounds kind." And now, she had kept her word even in absence. She was still part of the silence. The fire crackles softly, each pop and sigh like punctuation in a story only the house remembers. Henry sets his cup down and lets his hand rest on the windowsill, feeling the faint tremor of cold that seeps through old glass. He thinks of all the lessons he once taught, not from books, but from moments like this. How to listen, how to notice, how to keep a little light in dark seasons. Outside, the snow thickens. Each flake spins through the amber glow before vanishing into the drifts below. The air itself seems to hum with patience, the kind of patience that only winter can teach a language without hurry. Henry sits down in his favorite chair beside the fire. Cooper lifts his head, gives a half-hearted thump of his tail, then drifts back to sleep. The chair creaks in rhythm with the wind, and Henry allows himself the rare luxury of doing nothing at all. He thinks of the children he once taught, the shy ones, the loud ones, the ones who'd rather build forts than read poems. He wonders where they are now, Maybe one of them is sitting by their own fire, telling their own children that somewhere up in Vermont, there was a teacher who used to say that the world always feels new after snow. He smiles at the thought. He doesn't know if they remember his words, but he hopes they remember how it felt to be seen, to be guided, to be told that small kindnesses matter. The tea has cooled a little now. He drinks the last sip and feels the quiet settle deeper in the room. No traffic, no voices, only the heartbeat of the clock and the steady breath of the wind outside. He leans his head back and closes his eyes. For a long moment, there is nothing but the soft pulse of his own breathing. And in that small silence between heartbeats, he feels Elaine's presence not in the way grief once shouted, but in the way love whispers when it knows it's safe. He opens his eyes again and looks toward the fire. The logs have burned down to coals small, red, alive. He takes the poker and stirs them gently until they glow brighter. The light flickers against the walls, and the cabin fills once more with the color of warmth. He speaks softly, as though to her you'd like tonight. Elaine, the snow's just right. The kind you used to call forgiving. And the grabless, then he chuckles that quiet laugh of someone remembering a private joke. And the sound feels good in the air. He reaches down and pats Cooper's side. Come on, old boy, he says. Let's make it through one more winter together. The dog's tail flicks once, twice, and Henry takes that as an answer good enough. The night grows still again, outside. The snow continues its patient work covering fences, tracing rooftops, laying its soft hand over everything that was restless a few hours ago. Inside, Henry breathes in rhythm with it, a slow inhale, a long exhale, and lets himself believe that maybe peace is nothing more than learning to move at the pace of falling snow. The fire hums low. The kettle cools on the stove. The old radio crackles with a distant voice, reading the weather report for tomorrow. More snow. More quiet. Henry smiles. He wouldn't have it any other way. And so the evening drifts on a man, a dog, a fire, and a storm made of silence. A reminder that even in solitude, there can be companionship. Even in cold, there can be grace. Even in the slow passing of years, there can still be warmth waiting by the window. If you're listening from your own quiet room tonight, you might hear it too, that hush between snowflakes, that gentle rhythm that says you've done enough for one day. You can rest now. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the world grow soft around you. Let the snow do what it's always done, cover the noise, and remind us that stillness is its own kind of mercy. Sleep well, Henry. Sleep well, listener. The first snow has arrived, and the night will keep you. The tea had cooled a little in Henry's hands, but the warmth of it still lingered, not in the cup, but somewhere behind his ribs. He took another sip, slow and thoughtful, and watched the fire fold itself inward, one ember at a time. The snow outside fell heavier, now large, unhurried flakes spinning down like feathers. It reminded him of the winter they first spent here together, the year the cabin was still half finished. When he and Elaine were young and strong enough to believe they could build their own corner of peace. He could still see it as if it were happening now, Elaine, with her sleeves rolled up, sawdust tangled in her hair, laughing as she tried to hand him nails with gloves too thick for the job. He'd told her she looked ridiculous. She'd told him he looked perfect. And the way she'd said it made him blush like the boy he used to be. They had built everything by hand, the walls, the porch, the shelves that now held quiet jars of memories. Every board they nailed down felt like a promise. every stone in the fireplace, a prayer that they'd live long enough to watch the years stack neatly on top of one another. Like wood in a shed before winter, he smiled softly now, watching the firelight ripple across the ceiling. Elaine had loved winter in a way he never understood at first. She loved its honesty, how it stripped everything bare and asked for nothing but patience. She said snow was God's way of asking us to slow down. He whispered it aloud, not because anyone needed to hear, but because the words felt alive when spoken, like the echo of her voice had been waiting for its turn. He looked toward the hearth. There, folded neatly as it had always been, lay her old wool scarf. He hadn't moved it since the day she'd left. It was a quiet sort of shrine, not to her absence, but to the presence she left behind. He reached for it now. It was soft from years of wear, and when he lifted it, a faint scent of cedar rose into the air, that same scent that had lived in her hair when she'd come in from chopping kindling. Smiling as though she'd just conquered the world, he laid the scarf gently over the rocking chair that still sat by the window, her chair, the one that had always faced the snow. He'd kept it there through every season. Sometimes he caught himself glancing at it the way one might look toward a doorway, half expecting someone to walk through, outside. The wind shifted, and the birch trees made that low, hushed sound she loved so much, a kind of music too subtle for most to notice. Elaine had always said the trees sang differently in winter. He used to tease her for it, but tonight, he thought maybe she'd been right all along. The fire popped softly, and Cooper, curled by the hearth, gave a little sigh. The room felt fuller somehow, as if memory itself had weight, as if love, even after all these years, could still lean against the walls and make the air warmer. Henry sat back and closed his eyes. He could almost feel the rhythm of another winter-long past. The two of them shoveling the path together, laughing as snow filled their boots faster than they could clear it. The evenings they'd spent cooking soup over the wood stove, Elaine humming to herself old hymns, or sometimes just the wind's melody carried through her voice. He could see her as she'd been then, a strand of gray already touching her hair, the corners of her eyes etched with kindness. He remembered how she'd look up from her sewing whenever he read aloud, always pretending not to cry when he reached the last page. Stories keep the walls warm, she used to say, and she'd insist that every home needed both logs for the fire and words for the heart. He chuckled softly, remembering the night she declared herself chief story officer of this household. He'd saluted her then, and she'd laughed so hard she nearly spilled her cocoa. Now, even that laugh seemed to echo faintly through the rafters, a sound his heart still recognized instantly. He opened his eyes again. The firelight flickered across the scarf. The sight of it there, her color, her shape, her absence no longer felt like grief. It felt like grace. He had carried her so carefully all these years, not realizing she had never truly left. He looked around the cabin, the small wooden shelves lined with jars of preserves. The books she'd loved most, stacked unevenly on the desk. The photo of their wedding day faded to the color of smoke. Everything here was part of the same living memory, woven through his days like a quiet hymn. The tea was gone now. He placed the empty cup on the small table beside him and let his hands rest in his lap. The fire's glow pulsed across his knuckles like heartbeat light. He thought of all the winters since she'd gone, the ones that felt endless, the ones he'd counted by the number of logs burned, the ones where the silence felt too wide to cross. But tonight, the silence was different. It didn't ache anymore. It simply was. And within it, he could finally hear her, not as memory, but as something gentler, the echo of love that doesn't fade, only softens. He whispered, "Funny thing, Elaine, you always said winter teaches patience. I think you were right again. Cooper stirred, lifting his head just long enough to glance toward the chair where the scarf lay. Henry smiled. Yeah, he said quietly. She's still here, isn't she? The dog made a small, contented sound, then settled back into his dreams. Henry looked once more at the fire. The flames danced lower now, flickering like the pages of a book being turned by invisible hands. He let himself drift between thought and memory, between what was and what remains. There was no sharp edge to the past anymore, only warmth. Like the last sunlight before evening, he realized that maybe grief was never meant to be conquered. It was meant to be carried like a lantern through the snow. The wind outside calmed, and in the distance, a church bell rang from the valley below. The sound was muffled by the snow, but Henry recognized the tune, the same one they danced to once at Christmas. Long before the cabin, before the gray in their hair, he remembered her hand in his. How she'd whispered that winter nights were her favorite, because they made the world smaller, small enough for love to fill completely. He breathed deeply, feeling that truth settle into him like a warm blanket. He wasn't lonely. He was simply surrounded by time, and every second of it carried her name. The fire sighed again, and the scarf shifted slightly, as if touched by a draft, or perhaps by something unseen, something kind. Henry smiled, and in that moment, he understood that love doesn't disappear with the body. It lingers in the way wood smells after rain, in the hush before dawn, in the gentle ritual of making tea for two. Even when only one cup will be drunk, he reached for his kettle again, poured another measure of hot water over fresh leaves, and let the steam rise between him and the fire. It curled upward, glowing gold in the lamplight, and for a fleeting instant, he thought he saw her face there laughing, unburdened, alive. He didn't blink. He didn't need to. He knew what it meant. The room had become what it was always meant to be, not a museum of what once was, but a temple of memory, where the living and the remembered share the same breath, the same warmth, the same peace. The flames whispered softly, the kind of whisper that sounds like prayer. And Henry, with his eyes half closed, let his breathing fall in rhythm, with the flicker slow, steady, like snow falling on a quiet road. He didn't need to say goodnight to her. She'd never left the room, and in the stillness of that truth, his heart found rest again. The fire had burned low, its light soft and steady, a slow heartbeat against the walls. Outside, the wind had settled into a whisper, the kind of silence that made you believe the world was holding its breath. Henry sat half awake in his chair, Cooper asleep beside him. When it happened, a sound he hadn't heard in years. 3 firm knocks. Not the creak of wood, not the settling of snow, but knuckles on his front door. For a moment he wondered if he dreamed it. Then it came again, sharp and real. He stood slowly, joints complaining like old floorboards, and opened the door. On the porch stood a young man, maybe mid-30s, red-cheeked, breath clouding the air, jacket crusted with snow. Behind him, the storm had grown wild again, wind sweeping down from the ridge. His truck sat half buried by the road, lights dimming under the flurries. "Sir," the young man stammered, "I'm sorry to bother you. My truck slid off the road. I can't get it out." And Henry didn't let him finish. "No one stays out in a storm," he said softly. "Not if I can help it. Come on in." The young man hesitated, polite even in his misery. Then he stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots, shaking cold from his shoulders. The warmth of the cabin hit him like mercy. "Thank you," he said, his voice catching. "Name's Tom Bennett." Henry nodded. "Henry Miles. That's Cooper by the fire. Don't mind him, he only barks at squirrels. And sometimes politicians." Tom laughed. The kind of short, nervous laugh people make when gratitude surprises them. He rubbed his hands together, thawing his fingers near the flame. Steam rose from his coat as the snow melted away. Henry ladled soup from the pot that sat on the stove. Chicken, potatoes, something honest and old-fashioned. He handed the bowl over without ceremony. Tom took it like a man who hadn't been warm in weeks. They ate quietly for a while, the crackle of the fire filling the spaces where words didn't need to go. Outside, the storm pressed against the windows, but inside the room was thick with comfort, the smell of cedar and broth, the hush of shared company. After a time, Tom's eyes wandered to the far wall. There, neatly hung above the workbench, were Henry's woodworking tools, planes, chisels, saws polished by years of use. On the table beneath them sat half-finished birdhouses, each shaped with care, each slightly different. "You make these?" Tom asked. Henry smiled. "These old hands needed something to do. Used to build classrooms and fences. Now I build small roofs for things with wings. Keeps the fingers honest and the mind from drifting too far." Tom nodded slowly. "They're beautiful. My granddad was a carpenter too. Guess it runs in kind men." Henry looked at him over the rim of his cup. "Kind or stubborn?" he said. "Hard to tell the difference some days." The radio crackled suddenly, its signal catching a station through the storm. A scratchy old Christmas tune, Bing Crosby, or Someone Who Wanted to Be. Both men smiled without speaking. Tom took another sip of soup, slower this time. "You live out here alone?" Henry nodded. "Me and the memories. My wife and I built this place 40 years ago. She's been gone a while now, but the walls still know her laugh." Tom looked down at the table, as if weighing the right kind of silence to offer. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Henry waved a hand. "Don't be." She left enough warmth behind for both of us. They sat in that easy, quiet, older men know, the kind that doesn't need fixing. The fire hissed. The snow thickened. Then Henry leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "So what brings a young man like you up this way on a night like this?" Tom chuckled. "Bad luck and bad timing? Mostly. I'm headed home from the shop down in Rutland. My wife's due in a few weeks, first baby. I promised her I'd be home early tonight." Henry smiled. "You'll get there. Storms always end sooner than they think they will." Tom said, looking into his empty bowl. "She's nervous. Says she doesn't think I'm ready to be a dad. Truth is, neither do I. I keep telling myself I'll figure it out when the time comes. But lately, I'm not so sure." Henry's eyes softened. "You think any of us knew what we were doing the first time? We just built things one piece at a time. Homes, families, mornings. And when something broke, we learned how to mend it." Tom looked up. "Like those birdhouses." Henry grinned. "Exactly. Every life's got a crooked board or two. The trick is knowing which ones to sand and which ones to leave alone. Imperfections let the wind through, and that's what keeps a place from falling silent." Tom nodded slowly, turning that over in his mind. The storm howled outside, but inside it was all warmth and wisdom. After a while, Henry stood and reached for the pot again. "More soup." Tom laughed. "If I say yes, you'll think I'm starving." Henry poured another ladleful anyway. "I'll think think you're smart. Nobody ever learned anything on an empty stomach. The radio changed songs, now something slower. The kind of melody that drifts into the background like snowfall. Henry leaned back, his eyes half closed. You know, he said, I used to tell my students that everyone needs a craft, something that teaches patience. For some, it's writing. For some, it's cooking. And for the lucky few, it's building something you can touch when the world feels too far away. Tom smiled. Guess cars are my version of that. Fixing what's broken. Then you already know what matters. Henry said, fixing is easy. Understanding what's worth fixing, that's the lesson. They both laughed softly. Outside, the wind eased a little, its voice quieter now, more like breath than roar. Henry rose and poked at the fire, sending up a brief shower of sparks. He glanced at Tom. When the weather clears, I'll help you dig out that truck. But tonight, you're not going anywhere. Storm still got more to say. Tom nodded, no longer eager to leave. He looked around the cabin, the tools, the books, the framed photograph of a smiling woman beside a younger Henry. It felt like a room built from care, a lesson in what endurance really looks like. You've got a good place here, Tom said. Henry nodded. It's enough. A roof that holds, a fire that stays, and a little company when the wind turns mean. That's all any man ever needs. Tom smiled, glancing toward Cooper, who now had his head resting on Henry's boot. He seems to agree. Smart dog, Henry said. He's seen more winters than I can count. They shared another small laugh, the easy kind that fills a room without trying. The hours drifted by the way winter hours do, quietly, kindly. The storm softened, the air thick with the scent of pine sap and burning oak. Tom's eyes grew heavy, the warmth working its way into his bones. Henry poured him one last cup of tea. Drink this, he said. It's not fancy, but it'll help you sleep. Tom accepted it, then looked at Henry. Thanks. For the tea, the soup, the company, all of it. Henry waved the words away. Thank me in spring. If you're lucky, you'll still remember how the snow sounded tonight. Tom smiled, not quite sure what that meant, but knowing, somehow, that it was the kind of wisdom you carry for years before you understand it fully. The fire burned lower. The two men sat in a comfortable silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Outside, the last gusts of wind wandered off toward the hills. In the hush that followed, Henry spoke again, half to himself. Strange thing. Storms. They bring trouble to your door. Sure. But sometimes, they bring what you didn't know you needed. Tom looked toward him, eyes soft with gratitude. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I understand. Henry nodded, closing his eyes. And in that small cabin buried in Vermont snow, two strangers, one old, one young, shared a peace that felt older than either of them. For the first time in many winters, the house no longer felt like it belonged to memory alone. It breathed again, alive with laughter, soup, and the sound of human voices. Outside, the storm moved on, leaving behind a night washed clean and full of promise. Inside, the light from the fire glowed steady and golden, casting long shadows across the floorboards as if the walls themselves were smiling. The storm had quieted into a whisper by the time the clock touched midnight. The house no longer trembled beneath the wind's weight. Now there was only the soft exhale of snow against the window, and the steady breath of the fire, a calm pulse at the heart of the cabin. Henry sat across from Tom. Both men wrapped in the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Between them, the table glowed in the lamplight. Steam rose from 2 mugs of tea, curling like small prayers toward the ceiling. It was the hour when conversation changes, when voices drop low and truths begin to surface. Henry leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. "You know," he said, "I spent 40 years teaching other people's children how to sit still long enough to learn something useful. Funny thing is, I think they taught me more than I ever taught them." Tom looked up, half smiling. "Like what?" "Patience," Henry said. "Mostly that. You spend enough time with 10-year-olds, and you learn that not everything that matters can be rushed or fixed in an afternoon." He glanced toward the fire, its light glimmering over the old lines of his face. "I learned that growing a mind isn't so different from shaping wood. You start rough. You sand carefully. And if you're lucky, you end up with something that can stand on its own." Tom listened, elbows resting on the table, his eyes carrying that half-lost look of a man caught between past and future. "I never had much patience," he said quietly. "My dad was strict, I guess you'd say. If you didn't get it right the first time, you heard about it." Henry nodded. "Mine too. Different era. Back then we thought silence was the same thing as strength." Tom took a slow breath. "My wife's expecting in a few weeks. I keep thinking about what kind of father I'll be. Truth is, I don't know. Some nights I lie awake and wonder if I'll be like him, all rules. No warmth." Henry smiled gently. The kind of smile that forgives before it advises. "Son," he said, "no one's ever ready. The world gives you a hammer, and life teaches you how to swing it without breaking what matters." Tom let out a short laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "Yeah," he said, "but what if I drop it? Then you pick it up." Henry replied, "That's all any of us do. You think I never splintered a piece of wood I meant to keep whole, or said something sharp to someone I loved. Every man learns the same way, by breaking things soft enough to mend." The radio had gone quiet now. Only the crackling fire spoke. Its glow wavered across the room, painting their faces in shifting amber. Henry rose slowly and crossed to the workbench. He returned carrying a small wooden chair, its back cracked clean through. The kind of damage that waits patiently for repair. "This old thing," he said, "belonged to my wife. She used it by the window to read the morning paper. Been meaning to fix it since last spring." He set it gently between them on the table. "Want to give me a hand?" Tom nodded. Surprised but eager, Henry handed him a strip of sandpaper and a small brush of glue. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of sanding filled the room, a soft rhythm, steady as breathing. Wood dust settled like snowfall on the table. Henry watched the young man work. He liked the careful way Tom moved, hesitant at first, then steadier. It reminded him of his first students, learning to write their names without fear of the page. After a while, Henry said quietly, "You'll be a good father." Tom didn't look up. "How do you know?" "Because you're worried you won't be," Henry said. "That's the first sign. A man who thinks he already knows is the one who ends up teaching silence instead of love." Tom paused. Let the words settle like sawdust before answering. "I don't want my kid to grow up afraid of me." "Then don't," Henry said. "Fear's easy. Respect's quieter. But it lasts longer." They worked in companionable silence again, lining up the broken slats, pressing the joints together, wiping away the excess glue. Every motion felt older than words, an echo of every father and son who ever fixed something side by side. Each tap of the hammer fell like a heartbeat, steady, deliberate. Outside, snow drifted against the window, the wind humming low through the chimney. After a while, Henry spoke again. You ever notice how the good things in life require the same ingredients? Patience, gentleness, and a willingness to get your hands dirty. Tom nodded. Same goes for engines. He said, you rush it. You break it. You force it. You ruin it. Henry grinned. See, you already understand more than you think. They finished aligning the last joint. Henry handed Tom a rag. Wipe her down. Tom obeyed, smoothing the surface until it gleamed. The chair looked simple again, nothing special, yet both men knew it had changed. Repair has a way of doing that. It doesn't erase what broke. It just teaches the eye how to see beauty in the joining. Henry ran his hand along the backrest, fingers tracing the faint scar of the crack. She saw it again. He murmured, funny, isn't it, how something can break, clean through, and still remember how to hold? Tom leaned back, staring at their work. Wish people were that easy to fix? Henry chuckled softly. Oh, they are, just takes longer. Wood only needs glue and time. People need both, plus a bit of grace. They sat quietly, admiring the small miracle between them. The firelight danced across the repaired seam, turning it gold. Henry poured the last of the tea into their cups. It was weaker now, but neither cared. They drank in silence, the way men do when words would only clutter what's already understood. After a long while, Tom said, you ever wish you could go back, start over? Henry shook his head. Not really. The trick isn't starting over. It's starting again with what you've got left. Tom smiled faintly. That's a teacher answer. Henry laughed. Maybe. But it's also true. Every piece of wood carries the story of the tree it came from, the bends, the storms, the seasons it survived. You can't erase those marks. You just work with them until the grain itself starts to shine. Tom looked at him with quiet wonder. Do you ever stop teaching? Henry thought for a moment. Can't say I've figured out how. Even now. It's not about lessons. It's about passing warmth along before it cools. The fire popped once, a small spark drifting upward. Tom smiled at the sound. That's a good way to live. Henry nodded. It's the only way that's ever made sense to me. The old clock chimed once, soft and hollow, marking another hour passed inside their shared quiet. The glue had begun to set. Henry brushed his palms together. Satisfied, he looked at Tom, saw something in his eyes, a gentleness that hadn't been there when the night began. He realized then that the storm outside had done its real work indoors. It had brought two men together, one at the start of fatherhood, the other near the end of a long season of teaching, and given them both something worth keeping. Henry stood, stretching his back, and placed the repaired chair by the hearth. It creaked softly, as though remembering its purpose. He smiled. Looks like she'll last another few winters yet. Tom nodded. Guess we both learned something tonight. Henry raised an eyebrow. Such as? Tom smiled. That maybe fixing things isn't about returning them to how they were. It's about helping them become what they were meant to be. Henry's eyes warmed. Now that, he said, sounds like something a father would say. They both laughed quietly. A sound soft enough to mix with the wind. The fire had burned low again, but neither man felt the chill. The room was full of the warmth that comes not from heat, but from understanding. Henry leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the chair, then toward the window, where snow still fell like slow confetti from heaven. He said, almost to himself. Every storm brings something broken. If you're lucky, it also brings someone willing to help fix it. Tom didn't answer. He didn't have to. He only nodded. And in that small gesture, an old teacher saw the promise of another kind of student, one who would carry the lesson forward. The fire sighed. The glue dried. And somewhere in the quiet heart of Vermont, two lives, one seasoned, one beginning, met perfectly in the soft rhythm of falling snow. By dawn, the storm had moved on. The world outside was unrecognizable. Every branch, every stone, every forgotten trail, now wrapped beneath a pure, white silence. The snow lay deep and untouched, as if the night had been at work smoothing out all the rough edges of the world. It was the kind of morning that asked for reverence. Even the birds, it seemed, were waiting to sing. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned itself down to a quiet amber glow. Henry woke before the light fully arrived. Old habits die. Slow teachers always wake early. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache in his back, and listened to the kind of stillness that only follows a storm. Tom was already up, standing by the window, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, watching the forest catch the first breath of light. "Morning," Henry said softly. Tom turned and smiled. The kind of smile that comes easy in new light. Hard to believe it was roaring out there just a few hours ago. Henry nodded. Storms are like people. They burn loud. They pass quick. And they always leave something clean behind. Tom chuckled. Guess that's one way to see it. They shared breakfast bread, butter, and what was left of the soup, each bite tasting better for its simplicity. The kind of meal that asks for gratitude, not conversation. When they were done, Tom began gathering his coat and gloves. "I should probably see if the truck will start," he said. "Wife's gonna think I got buried under a snowdrift," Henry smiled. "If you did, I'd have marked the spot with a good piece of pine." Tom laughed, shaking his head. It was the laughter of someone lighter than he'd been the night before. As Tom stepped toward the door, Henry paused him with a quiet, "Hold on." He turned toward his workbench and picked something up, a small hand-carved birdhouse, freshly finished. Its edges smooth, its roof sanded to a gentle slope. He held it out to the young man. "I was saving this one," Henry said, "but I think it's meant for you." Tom took it carefully, turning it over in his hands as though it were something sacred. It smelled faintly of cedar and beeswax, the scent of patience, of craft, of human hands remembering purpose. "Sir," Tom said, "I can't take this." "You made it." Henry shook his head. "Things like this aren't made to keep. They're made to give away." He placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Build something simple for your child," he said. "Something that lasts longer than you. That's the only kind of building worth doing." Tom looked down at the birdhouse, his eyes tracing the small details, the carved edges, the little hole framed like a doorway. The faint initials burned into the back H. M. He swallowed hard, the way men do when words aren't strong enough to hold gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the bed, the food, the lessons." Henry waved him off gently. "You paid for it the right way by listening." The air between them felt warm, even with the door open to the cold. Snowlight poured in soft, forgiving, bright enough to touch the floorboards. Henry nodded toward the hill. "You'll make it out fine. The road will be clearer now. Just keep the wheels steady and your eyes ahead." Tom smiled, slipping on his gloves. He opened the door wider, letting the scent of morning rush in clean pine, crisp frost, and the faint sweetness of the world renewed. Cooper thumped his tail once in sleepy approval. Tom turned back one last time. "I'll bring the family up when spring comes," he said. "Want you to meet the baby. Maybe we can build something together, you, me, and the little one." Henry's eyes warmed. "I'd like that." "Spring's a fine time for promises." Tom nodded, stepped outside, and made his way through the snow toward the waiting truck. The tires crunched softly, a sound that folded perfectly into the morning quiet. Henry watched from the porch, hands tucked into the pockets of his flannel shirt. The young man started the engine, a cough, a growl, then the hum of life returning to motion as the truck crept down the long hill. Its tracks cut two clean lines through the untouched white. Henry stood there until it vanished around the bend. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. Goodbyes. He'd learned. Don't always need gestures. Sometimes peace is the wave the heart gives silently. He turned back toward the cabin. The door was still open, and from inside came the smell of cooling tea and wood smoke. The dog stirred by the fire, lifting his head in question as if to ask, "Is the world still kind?" Henry smiled down at him. "Yeah, boy, still kind enough." He looked around the room, the mended chair by the hearth, the scarf draped over Elaine's old rocker, the empty teacups, and the small pile of sawdust left from the night before. Every detail seemed to hum quietly with meaning. Not loud, not dramatic, just sure. He felt something ease inside him, like a knot untying after years of quiet tension. Maybe, he thought, this is what winter was meant for, to remind us that letting go and holding on were never really opposites. They were simply two parts of the same kind of faith. He walked to the window and looked out across the snow. The sunlight was rising over the ridge, spilling long ribbons of gold across the white field below. The light caught on a single blue jay perched on a fence post, small, defiant, singing as if it had waited all night to be heard. Henry listened. It was a fragile sound, but it carried through the cold like truth itself. He thought of Tom Young, nervous, hopeful, heading toward a future he could neither predict nor control. And he smiled. He remembered being that age once, unsure how to hold anything that mattered. Now, decades later, he realized that the trick had never been to hold on tighter. It was to hold gentler. The bird outside took off, its wings scattering light like a small miracle. Henry turned from the window, tossed another log on the fire, and poured the last of the tea into his cup. He raised it slightly, as though to toast the empty room. "To spring," he said softly. "To storms that bring good company." The dog's tail thumped once more. Henry sat down again in his chair, the one beside Elaine's rocker. He took a long breath, feeling the warmth of the cup in his hands, and let the silence settle around him. Outside, the world sparkled with its first clear light. Every snowflake caught the sun like a tiny promise kept. And for the first time in many winters, Henry didn't feel like the last man in a story. He felt like a sentence still being written. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the cabin breathe. The sound of the fire, the hush of the morning, the steady rhythm of peace, earned and kept. He smiled small. Sure. Grateful. Maybe that's what winter is for, he thought. To teach us how to let go and how to hold on, all at once. And as the day began, the world turned quietly golden, and the man who had taught others all his life finally learned what it meant to rest in the lesson itself. The snow is still falling softly now, like a whisper between the sky and the earth. Inside the cabin, the fire has burned low, but the warmth remains. It lingers in the wood, in the air, in the heart that learned how to wait for morning. The storm is long gone, and what it left behind is peace, the quiet kind that doesn't need to announce itself, the kind that simply is. Take a deep breath, in and out. Feel the calm of the cabin, the peace of a life well lived, the simple truth that every day, no matter how ordinary, can hold something sacred if we pause long enough to see it. Henry sits by the window again. The day has stretched into its quiet rhythm, a cup cooling by his side, a dog resting near his feet, and the world outside wrapped in light. He isn't thinking much, just watching, just being. He listens to the faint ticking of the clock, the slow, even sound that has marked his life for years. Every second, a heartbeat. Every tick, a reminder that he's still here. He looks toward the empty chair by the hearth, Elaine's chair. The scarf still lies there, folded neatly, as always. He doesn't move it. He doesn't need to. Love, he's learned, doesn't fade when it's left undisturbed. It deepens like wood polished by years of touch. Outside, the light changes that late afternoon glow, somewhere between gold and blue. It spills across the snow, and the trees throw long, elegant shadows that look almost like handwriting. Henry watches them for a while, then smiles to himself. Looks like she's still signing her name, he murmurs, and the air around him seems to agree. He takes another slow breath. There's a rhythm to it now, the breathing of someone who has finally arrived at stillness. He thinks of Tom and the promise of spring. He imagines that young family, a small house, a baby's laughter, a birdhouse hanging from a tree that hasn't bloomed yet. It brings him quiet joy, not the sharp kind that stirs the heart, but the kind that settles it. He realizes, maybe for the first time, that he's become part of something that will outlive him, not through blood, but through kindness, through a shared night, a repaired chair, a conversation that passed wisdom like a flame from one candle to another. Every life has its winters, but there is always a spark, a memory, a kindness, a gesture of care that keeps the heart alive, even when the fire burns low. The embers still glow beneath the ash, and if you listen closely enough, you can hear them hum with life. Take another breath, in and out. Let it travel slowly through you, like warmth through the floorboards of this cabin. Let your body remember that stillness is not emptiness. It's peace in its purest form. Henry's eyes grow heavy, but not with weariness, with contentment. He leans back in his chair, watching the snow drift lazily through the last of the daylight. Each flake falls at its own pace, each one finding its place in silence. He closes his eyes, and in the soft darkness behind them, he sees the long road of his life, the classrooms, the faces of children who once sat where he stood, the house he built, the winters he endured, the woman he loved. He doesn't wish for any of it back. He simply holds it all gently, as one holds an old photograph or a bird that has finally learned to trust the open hand. The fire pops softly. Cooper sighs. The cabin breathes. Everything alive. Everything at rest. Henry whispers a final thought, not to anyone in particular, but to the room itself, to the snow, to time. Thank you for the quiet. The wind outside picks up just enough to answer, its voice threading through the pines like a hymn. The narrator speaks again, softly, as if continuing the prayer on Henry's behalf. Every life is a circle of seasons. We plant, we build, we lose, we mend. And if we're wise, we learn that every ending is only another kind of beginning. There are storms we must walk through, and mornings we must rise to, and moments when all we can do is wait and trust that something unseen is still working on our behalf. Even in the coldest months of life, something within us still knows how to grow toward light. We are not built to give up. We are built to rest, to remember, to begin again. Breathe in and out. Let the warmth of this story stay with you. Let it move through you like gentle firelight, steady, golden, safe. Picture the cabin one last time, the snow still falling, the fire dim but alive, the old man at peace, the world holding its quiet promise. The light fades slowly, as all good lights do, not disappearing, just becoming softer. And in that soft, sacred quiet, you are safe. You have done enough for today. You have carried what needed to be carried. You have earned your rest. The snow keeps falling. The night hums its low, steady tune somewhere far away. A birdhouse sways gently in the wind, a small reminder that even in winter, there is shelter for those who remember how to build it. Now, let go. Let the world dim to its calmest blue. Let your breath match the rhythm of the snow. Let your mind drift the way light drifts across old wood. You are safe. You are home. The night will keep you. Sleep well tonight.